Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ask the Theologian on this Wednesday. Glad you are here for biblical, theological, and worldview questions. Always a joy to have you see what's on your mind today for our Ask the Theologian program. And if you have a question and you're watching live, YouTube or Randy White Ministries, you can put the word question first. Or you can go to randywhiteministries.org and always use the question button. You know how it works. And glad and delighted that you are here and you are with us and you are ready to go. And so we're going to jump right in. And, well, I tell you what, let's just go with Cash got a question up in Ellendale, Washington. Got a question that just came up. Let's take that top of the list since Cash is a live listener. Doesn't God already know what their end shall be? Deuteronomy 32, verse 20. Maybe. I'm going to get there eventually. I always have a hard time with Deuteronomy 32, verse 20. Got it. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very froward generation, children in whom there is no faith. Now, before we get into Deuteronomy 32:20 and the issue, doesn't God already know what their end shall be? Let's talk about Donald in Virginia uses the word positional truth. Is this a positional truth thing or not? I think we have taken the concept, God knows everything, the end from the beginning. He knows it for all circumstances, all places, all times, all peoples. And we have used as a proof text various passages through the scripture which don't actually say God knows the end from the beginning for absolutely everything. So I've got a pen right here. God knows when the ink is going to run dry. He knows the end from the beginning for this particular pen. He knows every word this pen is going to write, whether I write it or I hand it off to Luca or he writes it, which I don't do because it says the boss right there, so I don't want him to be thinking things like that. But I might give it to Cash in Ellensburg, Washington. Get that right. So God knows everything. He knows about pens. He knows about papers. He knows about writings. He knows about my death, about my life, my death. He knows it all from the beginning. He knows everything. And then I might add, because the Calvinists want us to believe that this is all in our free will, but God knew this before we ever had the opportunity to have a free will, and He created us so that these were absolutely the decisions that we had to make and the constraints under which we had to live. But for a Calvinist, you can lie about that and say that's your free will, because Calvinists don't mind making God a liar. They do it all the time. Now, does this position, Deuteronomy 32:20, the scripture, does it say that God knows their end from the beginning? Now, we're going to assume this is about Israel. I think it's a pretty safe assumption in the book of Deuteronomy. But back to it. He said, I assume that's God, I will hide my face from them. Now, that's it's either a right now kind of thing or a threat, probably a threat. If you do that anymore, I'm going to hide my face. Well, that's something he can know that this is what he's going to do. This is going to be his plan, okay? I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be. Now, this doesn't say, interestingly, I see what their end shall be, but rather, I will see what their end shall be. I think those of us who believe in a legitimate free will, none of us would take any power away from God. God can see to it that I am done, or you are done, or Israel is done. I will see what their end shall be. I think we can take that to say, I'm going to hide my face from them, and I'm going to decide how we bring this thing down to a conclusion. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to annihilate them. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to have the earth swallow them up and put them into a pit. I'm going to see what their end shall be. I'm going to see whether I'll have the Babylonians come in. I'll see whether I have the Assyrians come in. Whatever it is, I will see to it. And I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out when I get there. Now, that's a very legitimate use of those words. I will hide my face. I will see what their end shall be. You know, I was listening just the other day, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, I caught a little bit on the radio. Donald Trump was talking about somebody somewhere. How's that? Let's narrow it down. Okay, he was talking about somebody somewhere. And the reporter asked him, would you authorize, it might have been Maduro or someone in Venezuela, would you authorize the CIA to take him out? And Trump said, first of all, he said, well, that's a dumb question. And then he said, no, it's not a dumb question. It would just be dumb for me to answer that question. Now, what he's saying is, I'll figure out what I want to do with that crook when I figure it out. And I'm not going to tell you. I will see what his end shall be, carrying that thing out. So here, this does not at all demand, I will hide my face, I will see what their end shall be, doesn't demand that he knows their end from the beginning. Says, I will see to it. Now, check this out for me, Luca, if you don't mind. Deuteronomy 32:20, I will see. I would like to know what tense that is in the Hebrew. Now, let me go ahead and warn you all. Hebrew tenses are not like English tenses. We may not figure out anything out of this. It's probably going to be some sort of weird Hebrew word and followed by some other things. And if it does come out to something that we can see, like here, I will see is the future or perhaps the subjunctive, and that's only an English thing. The Hebrew doesn't really have that. So we're gonna look and see if there's any indication that will help us. But I will see what their end shall be. Now, it goes on to say, for they, Israel, are a very froward generation. You go to and fro. Fro means to back away from. They're going the wrong way, this generation. Children in whom there is no faith. So he's doing this because of their behavior. Their behavior, I think, is completely a free will kind of behavior. So back to it on this question. I want to read this correct. Doesn't God already know what their end shall be? I don't think so. Now, I think ultimately there are some things, and we talked about this in session 1 of Prophecy Reconsidered. It's a series we're currently doing on Thursday nights, and tomorrow night will be session number 2, by the way. But we talked about the difference between a prophecy and an eternal decree. There are some eternal decrees about Israel, but there's a lot in the meantime. I think you could, I mentioned Babylon earlier, the Chaldeans. I think you could put the Chaldeans here. I will see what their end shall be. I'm gonna wipe them out with the Chaldeans. And it wouldn't be a misuse of English language to say God brought the nation of Judah to an end with the Chaldeans and Nebuchadnezzar, because he did. Now, did they rise again? Absolutely. So I will see what their end shall be isn't, I don't know what I'm going to do with them ultimately in my eternal decrees and the eternal purpose of God, but what am I going to do in the meantime? Do I wipe them out? Do I cut them off as a branch for 2,000 years, maybe more? I think we can include some of these things that are not fixed and predetermined. I will see. What tense do we have there? The imperfect. Okay, that's a little bit of English language coming in there on the imperfect, but certainly that's what we're seeing there in the English is, okay, this is, imperfect means it really hasn't been accomplished in time and space yet. And I think we can take that grammar through there and say, then, this is at least a contextual truth. There, God he's speaking there. Yeah, this is later in the game than that. But God somewhat says it when they send the 12 tribes in. I'll see what their end shall be. Are they going to respond in faith or in faithlessness? Are they going to be toward or toward or froward? Are they going to be children in whom there is no faith? Or are they going to have faith? Well, 2 of them came back with faith. 10 of them came back without faith. And so he said, I'm going to let all of you die in the wilderness. In fact, I'm going to speed it up so all of you are dead in 40 years. We'll give you maybe some vaccines or something that'll give you a quicker death. We'll put it on you. And God killed the entire generation. I will see what their end shall be. They didn't have to do that. I think they could have chosen right then and there to say, hey, there's giants in the land, but we got God on our side. We can handle this, and be able to bring that about. Thanks, Cash up in Ellensburg. Now, help me out. I think I get these mixed up. Cash is in Ellensburg, Washington. Daniel is it Ellensdale, Virginia? Or Ellendale, perhaps? Get all those mixed up there a little bit. But John in West Virginia says, Mom used to tell me what my end would be, and if I persisted, Dad showed me what my end was. Probably did. Probably on your end. Let's go. Toby in Duncan, Oklahoma brings up chapter 46:10 of Isaiah on this, and it speaks of God declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will do all my pleasure. Yeah, this is, if you caught that session 1 of Prophecy Reconsidered, this, my counsel, my pleasure, my eternal purpose, those are things that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think they're typically, we'll have to look at this in this series, I think they're typically pretty easy to distinguish between what I in this series am calling a prophecy, which I said always has a contingency, and the eternal purpose of God, the counsel of God, the soul of God, the pleasure of God. God does not change. These are not going to change. These are, in a sense, a very part of his very being. These are going to carry out. The end from the beginning. That's almost, I don't really like this terminology, but I'll use it for lack of a better option. It's almost saying pre-time from post-time. All the time things, you're going to have a lot of say in there because human free will that God has given to us. And yeah, here's an example. Tony down in Georgia speaks of 1 Samuel 23, beginning in verse 9, where it says, David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him, and he said to Abiathar the priest, bring hither the ephod. Then said David, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant hath certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah, I'm going to pronounce that, I don't know if I'm quite right there, to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. Okay, very important there. Then said David, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men under the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will deliver thee up. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David escaped from Keilah, and he forbare to go forth. These two things right here. Thanks for bringing that up, Tony. Let's go back up to verse 11. The Lord said he will go down. Then down here, he forbare to go. I'll go ahead and put the word down. We're talking about Keilah. Saul didn't go. Why? The circumstances changed. David made a free will decision. The word got out. There's no reason for Saul to go now. So what the Lord was saying really is, hey, I'll give you a prophecy. Every prophecy has a contingency. I'll give you a prophecy. You want to stick around right here? He's coming for you. And the men of Keilah, sounds like a nice exotic place, doesn't it? Will deliver you into the hand of Saul. That's the prophecy. David's like, I don't want to stick around for that prophecy. I'm out of here. Get out of Dodge. And he does. And then there's no reason for Saul to go. So I think you can say, I don't know how else you'd say it, the Lord's word in 1 Samuel 23, verse 11, was not fulfilled. The Lord's word's very clear there, isn't it? The Lord said he will come down. But in prophecy, again, you have to look for the contingency and say, what's the human free will given? Is there an eternal decree, or is this in time and space? And this one here, no, it's more about man's relationship with man. It's time and space. It's all these things put together. This is prophetic of what will happen if. And all of these what will happen if things have a contingency. The contingency is not always stated. Now, that's actually the topic of our discussion on Thursday night. Old Man Bob, good to see you in Holly Springs, Mississippi, speaks of Matthew 23, verse 37, says, makes good case for how man's free will has been allowed to override God's wishes. Matthew 23, 37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have, I'm trying to highlight that, how often would I have, this was my will, would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth his chickens under her wings, and ye would not. You know, I suspect, I've never done a study on the free will of chickens, but I think they have it. And he says, you know, mama hen, she squawks, she offers, she calls. Little baby chick got his own free will. And he uses this illustration to say, just in the same way, man, you don't come get under these chicken wings, you're going to be a chicken wing on somebody's plate. So there you go. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that good word. I appreciate it. Thanks. For being here for that. And let's just jump right in here to our next question. If I can find my questions, I got them here somewhere. There we go. They're loading. No. How about that? Now they're loading. It happens every now and then that I come unprepared for the program. And waiting. There we go. Okay. I want to go to a question that came in this morning from Tony in Indiana. What is the proper position that should be taken as a true dispensationalist concerning divorce and remarriage? Tony says, I know that there is much taught on the subject from the ministry of Jesus, also from the references of the law of Moses. Your response is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Okay. Now, passages, there's a couple of passages concerning sort of divorce in Paul. Give me those passages there. I know he speaks about abandonment and sticking together. You know, Paul gives this word in one of the Corinthian books, I believe. And, you know, there's some passages in there about, you know, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church, gave himself for her. There's some teaching certainly about marriage. But one of the things we ought to say is, even as a whole, I mean, even if you use Moses and Jesus and Paul put together about marriage and family life, it really is very minimal. I wouldn't be surprised if direct doctrinal teaching under any dispensation, here's instruction, not example, but here's instruction. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't come down to maybe a page out of the Bible. So it's sometimes surprising. I think one of the reasons it's kind of surprising is because I know that marriage and family preaching builds a crowd. And a lot of the mega church people, they figured this out. You teach marriage and family, and you'll get a crowd. People will come and hear marriage and family when they're not necessarily quite as interested in 30 prophets of the Bible. So one has more of a marketing aspect to it. But when I see preachers say, okay, you know, we're going to talk about how to have a wonderful marriage the next 6 weeks, I know they're just giving psychobabble. Maybe it's all good psychobabble, okay? Maybe it's all good advice, but the Bible is so slim in its doctrinal teaching. And I think especially when it comes to Paul. When it comes to Paul, probably we're going to have a little bit more, not much though, a little bit more than husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, gave himself for her. And, you know, wives, submit to your husbands, obey your husbands, and children, honor or obey your parents. Next, let's move on to another subject. Because it's so cut and dried the way that it is supposed to be. I think we have greatly complicated it. And we greatly complicated it because we made love and marriage to be a romance thing. And romance is difficult. Love is difficult. But a commitment thing, an obligation thing, that's not so difficult. I don't know. You go out and buy yourself a new pickup truck or something like that, and you know, you sign the papers. There it is. You know, I'll pay you know, whatever the payment is, probably $75 a month. I'll pay $75 a month. And that's a commitment. Doesn't really matter how you feel. Doesn't really matter what your medical bills were. Doesn't really matter, you know, what the price of gas did, what the price of tea in China was, whatever. You know, you sign. It's a commitment. And for virtually all of human civilization, marriage was this kind of commitment. Go back and watch Fiddler on the Roof, you know, and Do You Love Me? Do you love me? What? Do I love you? I mean, you know, the wife, what's her name? She basically says, what a silly question. Do I love you? For 25 years, I made your bed, I fed your clothes, you know, fed your belly, whatever it is. I took care of your kids. Do I love you? What a stupid question. Marriage was always just this is what we do. This is the commitment. And it doesn't matter if it's Jewish marriage, Christian marriage, pagan marriage. Now we've made marriage so much more difficult because, we're connecting with our other half in the most intimate kind of spiritual oneness. Well, you get that, you're gonna have a tough time because, we people sometimes hate each other, and especially those who are closest to us. So I think that's why there's not a lot of teaching. But that's not the question, was it, Tony? The question is, what should a true dispensationalist, let's call it a rightly dividing dispensationalist, in which case we know that our instruction for life comes from the Apostle Paul. Now, not all of our doctrine, the doctrine of God, the doctrine even of the person of Christ, these are things that don't come from I'm trying to train myself not to say the person, but anyway, the doctrine of Christ, our Christology, our pneumatology, these aren't things that all come from Paul. But our doctrine of Christian living does, and marriage is certainly a Christian living kind of thing. So, Paul, in addition to husbands love your wife, Ephesians 5, I think that is, he speaks a little bit about divorce. Where can we find that? 1 Corinthians chapter 7, beginning in verse 10, he says, "And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord." That's pretty strong. "Let not the wife depart from her husband. If she depart, let her remain unmarried and be reconciled to her husband. Let not the husband put away his wife." Now, there's something, we're not going to dig into the Greek words here, but depart and put away are virtually the same thing. So on both sides, don't leave. "To the rest I speak, not the Lord." Some interesting things here we would want to get into, but again, it would get a little off of our actual question here. "If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. The woman which hath a husband that believeth not, if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy." This... Let me keep reading it before I go on. "If the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage. In such cases, God has called us to peace." That seems to say, hey, marriage is an option there under what sometimes we call abandonment. "For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt be saved thy husband?" Now he gets into more of these sanctification things. Now, I kind of suspect here, and I'd want to look back into my notes to confirm my suspicions, but I kind of suspect here that he really he's got a Jewish audience in mind, just like when he says women don't speak in the congregation, this is not what we do under the law, this is not what these Jewish congregations are going to do. We talked about this the other day. And that he's really saying, hey, there's some things that, as Jews, this is what we've got to carry out. But let's put that suspicion aside for just a moment, because I know that probably most are not going to be quite that persnickety. And let's just go with Romans through Philemon, that's ours. So let's take this as this absolutely is the instruction. If we have this as the instruction, and you have, let's say, two believers, then the wife is not to depart, and let's associate that in verse 10 also with the husband's not to put away his wife. So let's just, for our purposes, if we can, let's just say neither one of them can put away the other. Neither one of them can depart. Neither one of them can put away. They both have the same obligation. The husband and the wife, if they are believers, they're supposed to stay together. Now, if they don't, but and if, gets into a little bit of reality there, right? But and if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. And I suspect this "and let not the husband" would be exactly the same for the husband. It's not actually stated there, but I'm going to suspect that would be Paul's understanding as well. But and if he does put away his wife, let him remain unmarried or be reconciled to his wife. I think even the grammar would support that. Pretty sure we could convince the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that that was Paul's intent there, that this is both ways. So, in its strictest way, believing couples, married couples, are to stay together. If they don't stay together, then they are to stay single unless they come back and marry one another again. Now, maybe you could very carefully parse that out and say, bald-headed preacher, you got that one wrong. You applied to us what doesn't apply to us. Maybe. I think that it's going to be harder to convince the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, but you might be able to do it. I would say if you don't have time to try to develop a very good argument there, we would have to go with that is the argument. Stay together. If there's an abandonment, stay single for two believers. Then he goes into the rest. You've got one believer, one unbeliever, and he doesn't give those obligations to stay single there. Let's double check this again. To the rest, let's say non-believers. If a brother hath a wife that believeth not, she be pleased to dwell, let him not put away. If the woman hath a husband that believe not, he be pleased to dwell, don't leave him. Again, stay together is the priority. Now, then he gets into, this is where all of a sudden things begin to get a little sticky. And Tony, who happens to be a pastor, has to deal with the sticky matters. Because we're not like in the Middle Ages when the people didn't have a Bible there and we just read them the part that they want to read. They keep on reading, don't they? And somebody's going to say, Pastor, what does this mean? The unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife. The unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. Now, sanctified and holy, it's going to be the same, basically the same word, which is also the same word for saint. So I bring all that up to say, because verse 14 doesn't really fit verses 10 through 13, like it's bringing this doctrine that I don't think anybody, maybe some weird covenant theologians, but no dispensationalist would say that an unbelieving husband is made holy by his believing wife, or vice versa. And as long as one parent is holy and righteous, then the children are too. Nobody would say that. But that's kind of what verse 14 is saying, which kind of makes me suspicious that we might need to take that and say, he's got a very Jewish audience here. Because when you take verse 14, it probably, I would have to check my Judaism and check this according to Torah, but probably does bring them under the Jewish covenant. an unbelieving husband. Now, I am going to assume that in the Jewish world, unbelieving would mean he's a Jewish husband, but he's not practicing. He's under the umbrella of his wife in terms of the covenant. The unbelieving wife is under the umbrella of the covenant by her husband. And the children, they grow up under the covenant. Now, you and I aren't under the covenant. And I said some very strong covenantal theologians would apply the covenant into our life today, and they probably do infant baptism. If you get into the realm of those who do infant baptism or would honor and respect infant baptism like an R.C. Sproul or something like that, then they would apply this to us as well. And that's the point at which you just have to say, I think we're coming from a different framework altogether. Now, do we have any other Pauline passages about divorce, or is that it? I'm thinking that might be it. So everything else is going to come from Jesus or Moses. Now, the other thing to consider is marriage transdispensational, and therefore the teachings of marriage from Jesus and from Moses absolutely apply. You wouldn't want to apply the logistics of either one, like, what if you have a marriage with no wine? Well, Jesus turned water into wine at the wedding of Cana in Galilee, and this is the way it ought to be done. You probably don't want to get those logistics in there. Probably even don't want to get to what Moses required of a certificate of divorce, and even the rabbis debated over that, Gamaliel versus whoever the other guy was. They debated this, and the various rabbinical schools that were there. But are there some principles in Moses and Jesus? There might be, and those probably even go to divorce as something that God. It's never within the will of God. So I think the biblical, as you just bring this out, the full biblical teaching on marriage and divorce and remarriage is one man, one woman for life. And when you go through a rough spot, you just keep going. And typically, my experience has been couples that will just endure through the rough spot, they put it together. Eventually, they figure out how to deal with or live with that problem in a way that's honoring. So much there that probably ought to be more. Did Paul have any other divorce passages?
Romans 7, when he's referring to the law.
Oh, okay. Romans 7, referring to the law. And there, if I'm not mistaken, he is definitely talking about the law there, but he talks about death is what dissolves the obligation there. So he looks at it really in large sense in terms of a legal contract that is there. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Tony in Indiana. Let's go back to Cash here, back in Ellensburg, Washington. There are 8 verses with both words soul and spirit. Do you lean towards dichotomy or trichotomy? I am very much a trichotomy person. I do write about that in the anthropology chapter of Systematic Theology, a biblical literalist approach, that I believe we are body, soul, and spirit. I think that I don't know that I'll word this well. And Luca's working on a book on it, and so when he comes out, then we'll all know. But I think that these passages, I'll take your word for it, that there are 8 verses that use both soul and spirit. And I'm going to assume that when you read these, they appear to be equating the two to be one, soul and spirit. I think on those 8 verses, if we were to look at them, and it would be worthy to dig into it, and I hope Luca's doing that in his book, to really analyze those closely and say, is that actually the equation of 2 being 1, or are we just reading it that way? And that when you actually dig down to it, perhaps grammatically there very much are 2 required. Or is it even possible? Now, some people will cough up a lung when I say this. Is it even possible that we have translated it with too much human understanding, and we got sloppy in what we do, for example, in the New Testament between suke and pneuma, that because we weren't consistent, then we stumbled upon another and said, oh, wait, okay, now I got this. Is that possible? Now, I know that has a lot of implications that we need to be careful with. But, we have to deal with it academically as well and deal with it honestly to say, okay, maybe the reason these are maybe the reason we think soul and spirit is the same thing is because we got these all in the blender a long time ago. And is the Bible consistent with those various words, both right, whether it be Greek or in Hebrew? Is there something there that we might be more consistent? Or, is our flawed understanding? There's ways to work through this. It would just take a little bit of work in doing it. But I do think we have trichotomy. I think that our trichotomy really, and I know this sounds a little backwards, but our trichotomy is how we confirm if I can use the word trichotomy, we confirm the trichotomy of the Godhead as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Or we can flip that around and say, I see Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and I'm made in the image of God, therefore I've got to be 3. Whichever way you go with that, I think that pretty much everyone would agree there is kind of a difference between, let's say, the soul and the mind, or the soul and the spirit. But also, and probably this goes back to Jung and Freud and some of these guys, there's been such a confusion about what these were that they got so melded together that almost, it's like when you get something completely tangled up, the only way to do it is completely unravel that thing and start over again. And I think maybe we've got some of that in the dichotomy, the trichotomy, the things of the word. I think there are a few passages of Scripture which pretty clearly put us into a trichotomy. And so here's what I would do. Take those passages which are easy. For example, in the book of Hebrews, it talks about the Word of God, and it says, to the division of the soul and the spirit. Take some of those easier passages, some of the passages which have body, soul, and spirit, all 3 in a single verse, and then say, okay, I've got to take this as 3, therefore I will use that. It's an easy passage. I use the easy to shed light on the hard. Don't start with the hard ones, start with the easy ones. And that sort of builds the framework there. Just like on a puzzle, start with the corners and the edges. That's going to help out a little bit. And carry that out. Thank you. Appreciate that, number of comments that interesting, Cash, and I am not an expert on this. Dichotomy was strongly taught by the early church fathers. It'd be interesting to go back and see what they taught about that. And one of the challenges on early church fathers is, just like books today, there is a lot of difference of opinion. So you read one, it might say this, and then you find another one says something else. But I've never studied the church fathers on that particular issue. In fact, I'm not an expert on the church fathers at all. But that's a history of. You could do this in your book. Just add another 700 pages. A history of dichotomy and trichotomy down through the ages, especially theologically. What was it? I don't know. But thanks for that. Appreciate it. Let's move to this question again, which comes in just this morning. Why do people believe they are more blessed than others? Maybe because they're more blessed than others is one possibility. However, maybe we're using the word blessed wrong, because I think we use blessed in the sense of here is a God-given favor. And so then we're saying this person over here has more God-given favor than that person over there. And if we say it that way, it does sound a little offensive, doesn't it? I have more God-given favor than you. That sounds Calvinist. They have that kind of arrogance. So maybe we're using the word blessed more. I said, well, maybe because they're more blessed. But do we really want to say maybe because they have more God-given favor? They're one of the elect. Not only are they one of the elect, but they're one of the rich elect, and God has decreed this before the foundation of the world. If everything is directly from the hand of God, as the Heidelberg Catechism teaches, then some people are more blessed than others. But, we take, as kind of a foundational thought, certainly in the United States, but definitely even in Western civilization, all men are endowed with their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that all men are created equal. These concepts that we bring forth. If all men have the same rights, inalienable, God has given them, and all men are created equal, then nobody's more blessed than another. You got a very good point. Now, some people, it's hard to even take that out of our terminology. You want to say some people have more blessings than others. Well, there are circumstantial things that I haven't had to go through that a lot of other people have had to go through. I've never had death of a child. I've seen other people had a death of a child. Why them instead of me? Really, because random chance has hit them worse than it has hit me. I know that irks some people for me to say that. But I'm not one that believes God killed their kid and didn't kill mine. Death, danger, disease, Democrats, all the D's, killed their child instead of mine. Now, some other things, maybe I work harder than somebody else. And I work about, how many hours are in a week? 128? 124, I don't know. Whatever there is, add 6. That's how many I work. All the hours a week plus 6. So, but I know some people who work half the time as I do, and they get double the results. Are they more blessed? Maybe they're smarter in the way they work. Maybe they don't get distracted as much. Maybe, who knows what all the certain. Maybe sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. That's not a blessing. I'll have to say I was born in the right place at the right time. I had nothing to do with it. And I wouldn't even say, God blessed me there. I was born in 1965 in Casper, Wyoming. That was a good time and a good place to be born. Got a little Western spirit to me. And, it was before the total collapse of civilization. So I got to experience life when you got to ride your bike by yourself, barefoot. And people don't get to do that today. Yeah, but they get to do other things. I think the truth is all of us are born with an open slate. For some, you get born into a trust fund, and others you get born into poverty. Did God do that? Is that child more blessed than the other? I think for every example we could, let's take the trust baby versus the utterly impoverished. I tell you what, let's take Donald Trump versus J.D. Vance. Donald Trump was born rich. J.D. Vance was born poor. They're both kind of in the same place. Famous, world leaders, highfalutin, all that kind of stuff. For every trust baby that was born rich, we can find those that got on drugs and made a terrible, terrible wreck of their lives. For every baby born impoverished, we can find those who became unbelievably rich and powerful. I don't know that one's blessed more than another. They're both born naked and get a slap on the hiney. Go on from there. Now you got to make your decisions. So, why do people believe they're more blessed than others? I agree. I would rather say, I'm even okay with saying more lucky than others, harder working than others, better looking than others. Although I do have a theory on that, by the way. My theory is that 99% of people can look stunning. I figured this out because I realized that rich kids look better than poor kids. Rich kids tend to be handsome and beautiful, and poor kids leave a little bit to be desired sometimes. I decided, it's how you raise them. And you can take a poor kid, raise them to be beautiful, and they come out beautiful. I don't know where all that was going there, but my point being, there is I'm good enough with calling it luck. Does that scare anybody? I'm good enough with calling it luck. I was lucky to be born, middle class Western United States in the 1960s. Other people weren't lucky enough for that. Did I say blessed earlier? I was lucky enough to be born, is what I meant to say. Maybe we should train ourselves not to say blessed, because it does give the thought, the idea, the indication that this is what God has chosen for us, which is dangerous. So, as John says, it's you got to define blessed. What's that mean? If you mean blessed as in lucky, probably. Because, again, they're hardworking people, smart people, intelligent people, good-looking people. They got everything going for them, and they get run over by a train. That doesn't seem blessed to me. It's unlucky. No, let's assume they weren't walking on train tracks. They just, it happens. Maybe we need to quit using the word blessed. He's blessed. I mean, look at that suit he's got. What blessings he's got in his life. By the way, somebody bought me this suit in 2003. Yeah, a good point. Yeah, John says, I've been in pain since 2008. If I didn't rightly divide, I would think God were punishing me. If you took standard Christendom teaching out there, God has put this on you. Either he's punishing you or it's a thorn in the flesh or whatever it is. I'd say, there's danger, there's disease, there's imperfection, there's all the things that come about in this world. And John got it and I didn't. And that kind of makes us created equal. I can get it just as much as John, but not there. Thanks, Tim. Great conversation on Trump versus Vance and how God interacts. I really believe in the silence of God is the only thing that makes sense. Yeah, thank you. That's Tim in Omaha. Appreciate it. Gosh. Now, if we just had a silent president. I'm going to take Tim's question here. We'll move on. Does this pertain to that lingo that people use as a God thing? It was just a God thing. Yeah, I think so. Typically, when a person says that was a God thing, it is, maybe I'll say serendipitous, which is probably a complicated way of spelling God thing. But what we really mean is I don't know if I like the word luck, but I'm gonna call it luck, chance. I would like to study statistics more. I took a one semester class on statistics back in the 80s, therefore I'm an expert. The one thing I know about statistics is that I don't know much about statistics. That's what I learned in the one semester class. I've also read a book called The Black Swan. Pretty sure it's called The Black Swan. And it's about statistics, sort of. Statistics in life, about random events that kill you. It's a very interesting book, by the way. But here's what I think about statistics. Somebody who's a statistician can perhaps work this out. Everything has a chance. Everything. Maybe you could even say, well, I don't have a chance to win the lottery because I don't play the lottery. No, but somebody might play the lottery and give it all to you, in which case you sort of won the lottery, right? There's a chance for everything. Now, some chances are very, very slim. But even if you take this slim chance times this slim chance, there is absolutely a chance. A slim chance times a slim chance is even a slimmer chance, but there's absolutely a chance. And those are going to come together. It's 1 in a million. Yeah, but someday you're going to get to that 1 in a million. Sometimes these things come together. So there really is the chance that the unbelievable would happen. I saw a video the other day, and it had a picture of a girl at Disneyland with her family, I want to say in the 70s or 80s, I don't remember which it was. Let's call it the 80s, 40 years ago. And here was a girl standing with her brother and her mom and dad, and they were at Disneyland, and, you know, just at your typical snapshot. And that girl was getting married. And she and her fiance were looking through old pictures because they were going to make a slideshow, you know. And there's this picture of Disneyland. And the fiance said, "That guy back there looks like my dad." Isn't that funny? The kid in that stroller looks like me. Ha! Wow, how about that? Tried to put it out of his mind, but he kept, that looks like my dad and that looks like me. Mom, did we go to Disneyland in the 80s? Yeah. When? June 1985. When did you go? June 1985. Just so happened that in the background, there he was. She's a little toddler, he's a little toddler. What are the chances of that? Slim to none. None. There is a chance. So, where did I go on all this? There was a question there that Tim brought forth on, the God thing. Oh, that's just a God thing. Well, you know, people do go to Disneyland. You could choose. It could so happen that you go to the Disneyland the same time I go to Disneyland. And you get in the picture. The chance is there. So the God thing is, again, these things just happen. So I even would take some things like, I don't know, diseases, dangers, falling meteorites, all this kind of stuff. There's a sense in which we've all got about the same chance. I know there's some environmental things that can change our chances, certainly there. But if we want to call that luck, it's probably more statistics in there. I've got a friend, by the way, who haven't talked to him in a few years, but I used to be amazed because he had this mind that would put everything into a numerical quantity, lickety-split, and therefore he could decide how risky is this, how beneficial is this, how much should I put in here, what should I not do, should I do this, and quite successful at it because he could just statistify all that, just boom. By the way, he paid his way through college playing poker because he was just that good at knowing. You know, he's the guy that could play a game with 20 people and know what everybody had and then know what to do. Lot of stuff in there. Yeah, Ecclesiastes, we got to quit. Ecclesiastes 9:11. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, favor to men of skill. But time and chance happeneth to them all. Chiastic structure, which Bullinger loves. I kind of wonder, how much of that is time and chance. So many things that. Tim, thank you. Christ mentioned the tower that fell and killed 18 men. And doesn't he say something like, are you any better than they? You just happened to not be in that tower at the time. Could have been you. It was good timing. Okay, I got to quit there. All sorts of fun in the discussion times. Are people more blessed than others? Am I blessed? Let's try to go. We'll chew on this a little bit, but it's hard to train the mouth. Let's try to say, circumstances are good for me right now. How's that? Might not sound as spiritual as a God thing and blessed and all that. Thanks for being here with us today. Tonight I'll be on 2 Thessalonians. Got some interesting stuff tonight about the Antichrist and the restrainer. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, about 10 minutes after 6. Mountain Time will be there tomorrow night. Tomorrow we'll be back for Ask the Theologian. Off Friday for Ask the Theologian. Thursday night we will be back to our prophecy and contingency, prophecy reconsidered, Thursday night, 7 p.m. All sorts of good things going on. Check out the Magi sermon if you missed that on Sunday. And thanks for being here with us. Friends, we'll see you soon. God bless.